ChatGPT said, I've run into burning buildings for a living and learned that the loudest part of a fire isn't the crackle. It's the quiet right before, when everyone decides what kind of person they're going to be. In the bay at Station 11 on James Island, the tones drop and you get 4 seconds where the world is balanced between normal and not, and you either step or you freeze. Weddings, it turns out, have the same 4 seconds. I'm Ethan, 32, firefighter, second generation. I was supposed to walk my fiancée Kate down the front steps of St. Bartholomew's after our rehearsal and into a dinner where my mother would make a toast about 2 families becoming one. And my brother, Caleb, would clap a beat too late because clapping on time requires paying attention. Instead, I watched him drop to one knee in the center of the aisle and declare, in a voice I'd heard him use on managers and arresting officers, that this was his love story, as if love were a thing you could reroute by blocking traffic. If you want to understand the geometry of our family, you have to understand Charleston first. This city lives with water and pretends it's fine. Our streets hold their breath through king tides, Spanish moss drips like old secrets, church steeples are how we triangulate home. I work a 24/58 schedule, which means I get 2 days of thinking too much for every day of not thinking at all. On my days off, I run the Ravenel Bridge just to remind myself my lungs are mine. I met Kate on that bridge. The first fall after COVID slid off our shoulders a little. She was wearing a College of Charleston sweatshirt, 3 sizes too big, and earbuds that died 2 minutes into our conversation, which meant we either had to keep talking or admit we'd both rather be listening to something else. We kept talking. She teaches music at a magnet school on the peninsula. She's the kind of person who can make a dozen middle school trombones do the same thing at the same time and call it band. There's a calm to her that I've always trusted, a metronome beating steady under a messy melody. Before me, there was a month in college where she and my brother tried being a thing. Tried is generous. It was one of those short, bright, dehydrating flings, late-night quesadillas, the kind of kissing you do because everyone around you is also doing it, then a gentle, this isn't it, before finals. They stayed friendly without staying friends. When Kate and I got serious 2 years ago, she told me about it like you tell someone you love that yes, you used to like frosted tips. It mattered historically, not currently, to most people. My mother, Beth, is not most people. She loves hard and points it like a flashlight only she holds. Her favorite stories are the ones where she gets to cast the villain and then forgive them at a volume you can hear across the room. If Caleb trips, she blames the sidewalk. If I trip, she asks whether I read the instructions. She likes to say she raised 2 boys and 1 project. Caleb is the project. He is 27, charming with a 30-day warranty, and allergic to follow-through. He has never not known how to make an exit. He has also never learned how to make an entrance the right way. When I proposed, it was just us and the ocean. A Tuesday night on Folly Beach, when the wind behaved and the waves were doing polite applause. Kate said yes, without making me wait, then cried and laughed because she does both, as if they belong together. We told my parents at their house off Savannah Highway, while my dad stirred a pot of shrimp and grits like it contained a winning lottery ticket. Mom screamed, hugged us, and then, when Caleb walked in late with sand on his shoes and a story about a surfboard that got away, she said, without meaning to whisper, "Well, isn't this interesting?" She smiled at Kate the way she smiles at church when someone sings flattening a note she wanted sharp. In the months between yes and I'll, my mother took to calling the church office. At first it was normal things. Linen color, flower delivery, whether the pianist could play canon in D with more pep. Then, the questions got specific in a way that wasn't hers to ask. The coordinator, a woman named Laura who organizes weddings with the efficiency of a controlled burn, started CCing me on replies. "Hi Beth, happy to confirm aisle width is 48 inches. We do not do white runners due to safety liability." "Hi Beth, Per church policy, microphones are reserved for officiant and designated readers. No additional speaking roles may be added at rehearsal. I texted Kate. Are we doing a runner? She sent back a shrug emoji and then, remembering how I feel about emojis in serious conversations, a typed shrug, nope. The week before the rehearsal, I went by my parents' place to help my dad replace a ceiling fan. I found a folded invoice on the hall table under a Yankee candle that smelled like sunlit linen and lies. The header said Low Country Events Rentals. The line item, White Aisle Runner 75s. Name on the order, C. Ward. I took a picture and put it back. At the station that night, I lay on the bunk staring at the underside of the top frame and listened to the soft chorus of men who snore like they're apologizing. I told myself the runner could be for anything. A proposal. A photo shoot. Caleb's bed as a terrible joke. I watched the minute hand sweep like a metronome set one notch too fast. At 2:14 a.m., a call came in for smoke in an apartment on Ashley River Road, and for 40 minutes I was blessed with a problem I knew how to solve. When we got back, a family group message blinked in audio bubble notification, then vanished. Message deleted. A minute later, a text from my mother, sent to me alone, so excited for Friday's rehearsal, honey. Bring tissues. Friday came. The air was thick with September pretending to be June. Kate wore a blue sundress and her hair up, a simple clip that made me want to propose again. St. Bartholomew's sits on a corner where live oaks shade gossip, and when you walk into the sanctuary, you feel the way wood can hallow a room if you let it. Reverend Miller met us at the door with the handshake of a man who has calmed more mothers than hurricanes. He's mid-50s, the kind of pastor who listens with his eyebrows and makes a joke when the room needs to exhale. We keep the rehearsal short so people don't think they need to act, he said. Acting is for the reception. My dad arrived with his good shirt on and his tie in his pocket because he knows his neck and compromise don't coexist. He took a pew and looked up at the rafters like he was reading a manual. My mother swept in wearing a white blazer, because she would, and a perfume that smelled like magnolia and insistence. She kissed my cheek and then looked past me as if she were scanning for exits. "Where's Caleb?" she asked. No one in particular. He said he might be late. Traffic. She said traffic, the way some people say cancer. My best man, Marcus. A guy from the department who can carry 100 pounds of hose and an entire conversation, gave me a look that said, "Do we have a plan for your brother?" I gave him a look back that said, "Try me. I've considered 27. Kate's maid of honor, Sophie, a music teacher colleague with a journalist's instinct for receipts, had her phone out in that casual vertical way people do when they're not sure whether something worth capturing might happen. "I'm not filming," she said automatically, which is what people say when they're definitely filming. Reverend Miller clapped his hands once. "Friends, positions," he said. "We're going to run this like a quick drill. In through the narthex, down the aisle, pause, breathe, then stop pretending to count when you get to 5. We'll do an exchange, a recessional, and then you can go eat shrimp until your vows don't fit." We started. The church coordinator, Laura, with a clipboard that had seen more battles than a copy of War and Peace, pointed people into place. Kate's parents practiced their pace, murmuring to each other like, "And then we turn," was a new dance. My mother hovered near the front like an usher without a flashlight. She kept glancing at the back doors. Her hand vibrated on her phone in a way you only see when someone is texting with their entire nervous system. I caught a glimpse of the thread over her shoulder when she tilted the screen too high. The name at the top wasn't Caleb. It was C Events. I didn't know if the C stood for coordinator or chaos. We made it through the first run without incident. Kate's laugh echoed under the rafters when I fumbled the mock ring exchange. Reverend Miller made a joke about grace for practice and told me to keep the clumsy for the reception. The second run, we reset. I took my place at the front, Marcus to my right, my dad in the front pew, my mom beside him perched like a cat who hears an engine before anyone else. Laura gave a thumbs up from the back. The pianist, a college kid named Alec who moonlights as if Chopin paid by the hour, noodled the first bars of the processional to get his fingers ready. Then the back doors opened and the air changed. It wasn't colder. It was the kind of draft you get when a story arrives wearing the wrong suit. Caleb stepped into the aisle with the exact face I always hated on him, earnestness squinting into italics. He was in a white linen shirt that tried too hard and a pair of loafers that had never known rain. He held a small velvet box. For one heartbeat, I thought we were getting pranked by a stranger with a YouTube channel. Then my mother exhaled, "Thank God," like a woman who just saw a lifeboat. "Caleb," I said, and my voice didn't travel as far as I wanted it to. He didn't look at me. He looked down the aisle the way you look at a horizon you think you deserve. "Kate," he said, loud enough to make Alec's hands freeze above the keys. "Wait." Kate stopped halfway to the altar with Sophie. Her face went neutral, the classroom voice she uses when a trombone section decides B flat is subjective. "Hi, Caleb," she said. "We're actually in the middle of—" "This is my story," he said, stepping forward like the aisle belonged to him by eminent domain. "Our story." He went to one knee. He did it badly, like he hadn't thought through which leg his body preferred. He opened the box. Inside was a ring that wasn't the one on Kate's hand. Reverend Miller's voice was gentle, but held its own spine. "That's enough," he said from beside me. "Sir, this is a rehearsal for another couple's wedding." My mother stood. "Reverend, with respect," she said, her respect already exhausted, "they dated in college. She's not supposed to marry his brother." "You're not supposed to wear white to a wedding," Sophie muttered behind Kate, and her phone never dipped. "Beth," Dad said, that single syllable working overtime. He didn't stand. He didn't need to. "In our family, my father's height is a tone more than a measurement." Caleb kept going, like he practiced this in a mirror and hadn't built an exit. "Katie," he said, using a name nobody had permission to use anymore. "We were stupid then. You and me. We were time that didn't know what to do with itself. But now we do. We do." He smiled. The way you smile when you're losing ground and you decide to act like you're winning the long game. He glanced at my mother. She did a small nod I recognized from every soccer sideline where she'd convinced a ref he hadn't seen what he'd seen. And then, impossibly, the aisle brightened and a white runner started unfurling from the back like a bad magic trick. Two teenagers in polo shirts from the rental company we'd used for chairs at the reception started rolling it down, confused and dutiful. The runner hissed when it met the wood, a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand up because it was the same pitch a smoke detector makes when the battery dies at 2 in the morning. Laura moved fast. She stepped between the boys and set her clipboard on the runner with a smack. "No," she said, "this is a tripping hazard and not approved by the church." She looked past them into the vestibule. "Who let them in?" My mother raised her hand like a parishioner who knows the answer already. "I did," she said, "as his mother." "You also signed a contract," Laura said without blinking. "That specifies no aisle runners. And you emailed me 3 times about exceptions. I replied 3 times that there aren't any." She pulled her phone out. "Would you like me to read them?" Caleb shifted, something cracking in his posture that made the floor tilt back toward reality. "Ethan," he tried, finally looking at me, widening his eyes like a pleading emoji he hoped would become a person. "Man to man." "Man to man," I said. My voice not rising because the room didn't need volume, it needed gravity. "You need to leave." He blinked. He looked down at the ring like it could make his feet work. "I love her," he said, a sentence people use when they want to put a period where you've put a boundary. "You loved the version where nobody asked you for anything," Kate said. She didn't raise her voice either. Her hands didn't shake. I watched her choose who she was in the same quiet I get before an air horn. My mother moved down the pew like she used to move down a grocery aisle when she was mad at prices. She stopped in front of Kate. They were close enough to share breath. "You," she said, making the word 2 syllables. "Hunt. You hunted this family because you wanted a name with a steady job and a pension. You took my firstborn because you can't keep anything of your own." I stepped forward, and Reverend Miller put a hand out, not on me, in front of me, like a guardrail. "Mrs. Ward," he said, "you need to step back." Kate didn't. She stood and let my mother's words land and die on the wood. "Beth," she said, the gentleness in her voice, the kind you use on a skittish animal. "I'm marrying Ethan. You don't have to approve. You do have to stop." "Or what?" my mother snapped, and in the next breath did the thing I had not calculated because it belonged in a different movie. She reached out and put her hand on Kate's shoulder and shoved. It wasn't hard. It was a check, the kind you give someone in a crowd to show ownership. Reverend Miller stepped between before my body had fully remembered how. He placed himself in the lane like a man who's broken up fights at youth group and funerals. "Enough," he said, and the word filled the nave without echoing. "This is over." "Don't you touch my mother," Caleb barked, now playing a role even he didn't like. "Nobody touched your mother," Marcus said from beside me, straightforward as a hydrant. Kate straightened like a reed after a gust. She reached for my hand without looking, and I gave it without wondering. Sophie's phone was still up, steady. Laura's eyes were down on her screen, thumbs moving with the speed of policy. She looked up and met my gaze with the expression of someone who just found a timestamp. "I have emails," she said quietly, "and a payment receipt from C. Ward's for the runner. He sent a screenshot to your mother at 9,037 this morning confirming delivery." My mother's face split into a smile that looked borrowed. "What?" she said. "Mothers help. It's what we do." "Helping is not ambushing a rehearsal," Reverend Miller said. "Helping is offering to feed people. We have ministries for both." From the aisle's edge, one of the rental kids cleared his throat. "Ms. Beth told us to roll it out now," he said, as if confessions had an hourly rate. "Said it was, a stunt." "An aisle stunt," the other kid said, nodding helpfully. "She said that. Church aisle stunt. Thought it was like a theater thing." My father finally stood, not to be tall but to add weight to the moment. He looked at my mother with a tired kindness I recognized from nights he spent on the couch, because that's where silence sleeps better. "Beth," he said, "enough." She looked at him like he had used a word she didn't approve of. Then she looked back at Kate and spat. "She's not yours until she's on your knee." And the sentence hit my chest first as nonsense, and then as a thing I had seen before, the deleted voice message. The text she had unsent. Hearing it spoken aloud made something sharp inside me go still. Sophie's phone blipped, an alert. "Beth," she said, incredulous, eyes not leaving the screen, "did you seriously send that as a voice memo to the group this morning and then delete it after I listened?" She tapped, and the sanctuary filled with my mother's voice on speaker, recorded like a boomerang she'd tried to pull back mid-flight. "She isn't yours until she's on your knee," the memo repeated, tinny and smug. "Don't you forget that." My mother lunged for the phone. Sophie stepped back with the reflexes of a woman who has taught sixth graders not to touch what isn't theirs. "Nope," she said. "No, ma'am." Laura lifted her own phone. "I'm calling the church office to have security escort non-participants out," she said, which in St. Bartholomew's language means the sexton, who can lift a piano by himself, and a retired cop who volunteers for exactly moments like this. "Don't bother," Sophie said. "I'm calling 911. She didn't say it like a threat. She said it like what you do when a boundary becomes a report. My mother's face did a complicated thing that looked like the last 15 years, condensed into a blink. She took 2 steps back and then forward again, as if her body couldn't decide whether to be the person who started this or the person the story would now make her be. Caleb rocked on his heels, ring box still open. Absurd. He looks smaller than I have ever seen him, and I have pulled him out of a police car through the window of friendship before. He looked at me like there might still be a way to make me solve this for him. "Ethan," he said, trying for my name like it was a key that might fit anywhere. "Man, tell her. Tell him. Tell them. She and I, look, it's complicated. You and me." "You and me," I said, careful and calm, "are brothers. You and me are not rivals. We never were. You and me are men who grew up in the same house and decided different things about truth. One of us gets to get married here tomorrow. You can either be on a sidewalk when we come out, clapping, or you can be anywhere else." "You can't ban me," my mother said. "This is a church." "This is my church," Reverend Miller said mildly, "and my sanctuary. And this is their rehearsal. You are a guest. You can remain a guest or excuse yourself like one. Sirens don't belong inside sacred spaces, but in my head, I heard them anyway. It's what happens when you've trained your body to anticipate the sound of help and the sound of trouble and how they braid. Out in the parking lot, a car door thudded that sounded official. Maybe it was nothing and sounded like everything because my heart had found its own metronome and decided to double time. Laura's phone buzzed again. She winced like something sharp had caught her. "Also," she said, "to me, to Kate, to the room, for your records, Ms. Ward emailed me at 7001 this morning asking whether spontaneous guest vows could be accommodated during rehearsal. I replied no at 7118. She forwarded my reply to Caleb at 7021 with the note, and I quote, "We'll make our own lane." Kate let out one soft laugh that wasn't a laugh. "Of course she did," she said. My father exhaled, a long, emptying sound, and sat back down, not giving up. Sitting this one out so he didn't become part of it? I had seen him at baseball games, working second shift, drinking coffee at the edge of rooms where my mother built stages. No one could stand on except her. He was not a coward. He was a man who knew that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not be the next loudest person. "Everyone," Reverend Miller said, the pastor voice now fully engaged, "we're going to take a break. Wedding party, please step into the parish hall. Ms. Ward, Mr. Ward," and the way he separated our last names with that comma held a sermon. "I need you to leave the sanctuary now." My mother opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I won't be made the villain," she said to no one and everyone. Caleb finally stood up from his one knee. The gesture had never looked less like honor. He shut the ring box slowly, like even it needed convincing. He looked at Kate for the first time since he'd entered, and whatever script he'd learned bled out of his face. She was not the girl who laughed at his jokes in a dorm. She was a woman standing in a church, not moving, her hand in the hand of the man she had chosen, and that was a kind of math his charm had never had to solve. "Go," I said, and my voice wasn't my firefighter voice, wasn't my son voice, wasn't anything I recognized. It was the voice people use when they pull a trigger they didn't want to load. "Caleb, Mom, go." For a second, I thought we might get mercy. My mother's shoulders dropped a fraction. Caleb's head dipped. The runner curled up on itself at our feet like a white tongue having second thoughts. Then the side door opened, and the church sexton walked in flanked by a deacon who still lifts like he plays linebacker in the church league. And somewhere in the vestibule, a radio crackled the way only radios that speak for the city do. Sophie's phone was still in her hand, recording, and Laura's thumbs were still moving, compiling, and I could feel the entire story rearranging itself from family drama into incident. And there was a strange relief in that, because incidents have forms and forms get filed, and then people who aren't you make sure the rules get enforced. I reached for Kate, and she leaned into my side like a person taking shelter under a solid awning when the rain decides to land all at once. I could feel the inhale she took, deep and even, the way she tells her students to breathe before a hard passage. Reverend Miller stayed where he was, hands visible, eyes steady, calm, radiating outward like the smell of hymnals. My father rubbed a thumb along the edge of the pew as if he could smooth splinters out of something older than all of us. The line between who we'd been and who we were about to be ran right there down the center of the aisle, a literal white stripe some teenager had unrolled because an adult promised them a tip, and I realized I'd been standing on it the whole time. The deacon and the sexton guided them toward the narthex, calm but immovable. My mother turned once like she might deliver a benediction of insults, then clocked the deacon's shoulders and picked a different gospel. Caleb hesitated in the doorway, still holding the little velvet box like a prop he couldn't put down, for fear the scene would admit it was over. When the door shut behind them, the sanctuary took a breath you could almost hear. We filed into the parish hall at Reverend Miller's request. Round tables, a coffee urn that tastes like every church morning you remember, bulletin boards stapled with charity drives and potluck signups. Kate squeezed my hand once in a rhythm I knew from her orchestra. Ready, set, hold. Marcus stood beside me, a wall I didn't know I'd need when I woke up that morning. Laura stacked her clipboard with both palms like she was setting down a live wire. "I'm sorry," I said to no one and everyone. "Don't you dare," Kate said, and that settled something inside my chest that had been tumbling since the runner hissed. Sophie took a breath like she'd reached a rest in a solo. "I've got video," she said lightly, as if the phone had tripped and landed on record all by itself. Beth grabbing Kate, the runner, the "she's not yours" line, Caleb's kneel. I also have Beth's voice note from this morning saved. When people delete, my teacher brain saves. Occupational hazard. Laura raised her phone. I have a full email thread and the paid invoice. If the church needs to issue a trespass warning for future, I'll attach it to the file. She glanced toward the door. I also called 911. They're on campus. This is above my pay grade now. I didn't realize my dad had followed us until I felt him at my back. He didn't touch me. He never does in moments like this. We're a family of handshakes and shoulder passes, not grand gestures. "You two okay?" he asked, eyes moving from Kate's face to mine, to our hands, tallying, assessing, like a man checking doors in a storm. "We will be," I said. And it was true, not because I had proof yet, but because there was a steadiness in the room you can't rent. Blue strobes kissed the stained glass in the hallway, dim at first, then brighter, the way summer lightning tests a house. Two officers stepped in with the kind of posture that diffuses rooms. The taller one introduced himself, asked the simple things first. Names, what happened, whether anyone needed medical attention, whether this was being recorded by the church system as well. Laura nodded. St. Bartholomew's live stream ceremonies, even our rehearsal had a motion sensor feed. The officer's eyebrows registered relief, the way only men who have argued with he said, she said, for a living can. "We'll take statements," he said, and the phrase statements yanked the story out of the swamp. Incidents and forms, boundaries with letterheads. We sat in pairs and told the truth in separate paragraphs. The pianist, Alec, hovered, apologetic for the wrong thing, as if his arpeggio had opened a portal. The sexton stood in the hall, arms crossed, guarding the church like it had asked him personally and might thank him later. When it was Kate's turn, she spoke in the same voice she uses to explain time signatures to a room of kids who'd rather play fast and be done. Clear, calm, exact. The officers listened. They watched Sophie's video twice, once for the plot, once for the evidence. They took photos of the slight red bloom where Beth's hand had shoved Kate's shoulder. They asked to see the runner invoice and the emails. They wrote down the time the voice memo had pinged Sophie's phone. At some point, Reverend Miller stepped in with a pitcher of water and a prayer you say with your eyebrows and not your mouth. In the narthex, Beth's voice, carried like a radio, turned too high to cover silence. "You people are dramatizing a family moment," she told someone who did not answer. "This is a church. You're humiliating me." "Ma'am," the shorter officer said, patient the way a teacher is patient, "we'll need you to calm down and hear the options. There's a reported simple assault, filmed and corroborated. The church is also issuing a no trespass notice for further rehearsals and the ceremony. We can do a report today and, depending on the victim's wishes, issue a summons to appear. Or we can do a warning and a trespass notice now and revisit later." "Victims," she repeated, like the word insulted her personally. "She's not a victim, she's an opportunist." "Beth," my father said quietly, "stop." Caleb kept his head down. I watched him through the long open rectangle of the hall like he was in a diorama, an adult child experiencing consequences in the wild. He finally handed the ring box to an officer when asked, like evidence might erase the joke. The officer looked at it the way men look at props when the show isn't funny. They took our statements, and at the end, the taller officer asked us what we wanted. Kate looked at me. I looked at her. We had learned each other's faces well enough to split the sentence evenly. "We want this on record, and we want them away from our wedding." The officer nodded. He explained the difference between a criminal summons and a no-contact order, between the church's property trespass and a family court protective order. He wasn't trying to sell us anything. He was laying out shelves in a hardware store and asking which tool we needed first. "Start with the report and the trespass for the church," I said, "and if there's any violation or if she comes near Kate again, we go for the protective order." Kate added, "And I want it documented that she put hands on me. I don't want to wake up in 3 years and wonder if I imagined how it felt because people told me to be nice." "Copy that," he said, and wrote it exactly that way. They served Beth a trespass notice for the church there in the hall. She tried to hand it back. They did not take it. The officer explained the consequences in a tone that could teach a class at night school. He did not look at Caleb when he said them. Caleb stared at the floor. When they were done, my mother said, "To the air, to God, to whomever she thought was on her side. You'll regret this, and I have no idea whether she meant Kate, the Reverend, the officers, or me." Then she left, the white blazer still spotless, the runner abandoned in a heap, like a ghost that had tripped on its own sheet. Caleb followed her out like a kid who'd realized the field trip wouldn't save him from algebra. At the door, he turned as if he would say my name like a lifeline, and then didn't. He went. The church grew back around us, piece by piece. Reverend Miller exhaled like a season ending. He took off his glasses and cleaned them, even though they were already clean. "I've seen a lot in this room," he said, half to himself. "Not that. But listen." And here he leaned on the table and looked right at us. "People will tell you that the holy thing to do is absorb. It is sometimes. Today, it wasn't. Today was holy in the other direction. Boundary is not cruelty, it's craft." We did not finish the rehearsal. It didn't feel like a drill anymore. It felt like a test we had already taken and passed by, refusing to cheat. We stood in the parking lot under a sky that looked freshly scrubbed and decided what to do with tomorrow. "Do we want to get married here?" Kate asked. Not a complaint, a calculus, because I'm not walking down that aisle with her breath still in it. "Then we won't," I said, "because love is sometimes duct tape and a new plan." "Folly," I added, and saw her shoulders drop the way they do when she hears her favorite measure in a song. We made calls from the church steps. If you've ever replanned a wedding in 20 hours, you know it's less about vendors and more about verbs. Kate's friend with the Airbnb on Folly Beach said yes before we finished the sentence. A food truck we both like had a cancellation. The station agreed to let us borrow 2 folding tables and a string of bistro lights from last year's fundraiser. Marcus texted, I can wrangle guys for setup. Tell me when. Sophie sent. Judgy Aunt Denise is off the list. Chill Aunt Joan says she'll bring 3 pies and a folding fan army. Laura, saint of coordinators, offered to call our guests herself with the new location and the kindest possible version of why. We went home and slept like people whose phones were in a bowl in another room. In the morning, I ran the beach with Kate, the sand still cool, the sun deciding whether to be kind. We drank coffee out of mismatched mugs at a rental kitchen table, while Marcus and 3 firefighters who know exactly how to lash cords to posts made a ceremony space happen between 2 dunes. Sophie hung paper lanterns that threatened to look corny until the light hit them just right. Children built a sandcastle that became our ring pillow because Ellie insisted it should. Reverend Miller arrived without his robe and with his sleeves rolled, and I loved him for both. Only the people who knew how to be guests came. My Aunt Joan, the good one, hugged Kate like she'd been waiting her whole life to hug someone correctly. 2 of Kate's students showed up with a piece of driftwood they'd sharpied our names on in a handwriting that made me believe in the public school system again. My father came alone, early, carrying a cooler of ice and 2 beach chairs that had seen so many summers they had tenure. He hugged me with both arms, which he's done maybe 4 times in my life. It didn't feel like a new father. It felt like an old one who'd been waiting for a reason. Your mother, he said quietly, is not coming. She tried to call the old pastor at St. Bartholomew's to stop this one from officiating. He laughed. And here he stopped. That word stuck in a place men of his generation don't find easy. I'm sorry. For all of it, for my part in it, which is any time I chose quiet because it kept the house smooth. Thanks, Dad, I said, for being here anyway. He looked past me at the water. I'm tired of being a statistic, he said, and I knew what he meant. A background figure in a drama one person writes for everyone else. We got married barefoot at low tide, with the sea throwing its slow applause and a breeze making the ribbon on Kate's bouquet behave. We said the vows we wrote, which were mostly promises to be specific. Not always. Not never. Things like, I will listen the first time you tell me you're tired, and I will not make you convince me you matter. Reverend Miller said a short thing about houses that stand because someone learned how to say no before the walls bowed. Marcus handed me a ring without dropping it, and Sophie produced the license at exactly the right second, like she'd been born to stage manage joy. We kissed like people who had seen what happens when the wrong stories try to interrupt and had chosen ours anyway. When we turned, the ocean did that shimmer. It does, that makes even accountants believe in magic. The handful of claps on the beach sounded louder than any sanctuary. We ate tacos out of foil and danced on sand that turned our feet the same color and cut a grocery store cake with a firefighter's pocket knife because someone forgot the server. When the sun started to bleed, my father took a long walk down the beach alone and then came back looking lighter, like some knot had finally given up. News travels in Charleston the way water does, everywhere eventually. By the time we got home that night, my mother had posted a 4-paragraph status on Facebook about betrayal and stolen ceremonies and children who forget who fed them. Half the comments were cousins and neighbors. She's bullied into thinking outrage is a brand. The other half were women with our last name who have been waiting for a decade to say, Beth, sit down. Aunt Joan wrote, proud of Ethan and Kate for keeping it kind and safe, and got 37 likes in 4 minutes. The next day, the church office called to confirm they had filed the trespass and to ask if we wanted copies. We're switching to scanning everything while the memory is fresh, Laura said. She sounded like a woman who had met a line and decided never to lose sight of it again. The police report got processed the following week. It wasn't a dramatic document. It was dates and times, and a description of a shove, and the sentence, parties advised of trespass and consequences. The city magistrate set a date for a court appearance for Beth on a simple assault, summons because we had decided to ask for it. The server delivered the papers to my mother on a Tuesday morning. She called me 6 times in an hour. I didn't pick up. Then she called my father. He picked up and said, "The only person you should be calling is a lawyer," and hung up. He told me that later like he was reporting a weather event. In the neighborhood, people took sides quietly. The aunts chose us. The cousins stayed out of the group thread or DM'd Kate. Little messages like, "You deserved your aisle." My mother kidnapped a few mutual friends for coffee and tried to sell them a version where we had ambushed her with our boundaries. Some believed her for an hour, fewer for an hour, fewer for a day. It turns out when you grow up watching a woman throw her weight around rooms and you finally see a video of her hand on a shoulder she doesn't own, reality becomes non-fungible. We exchanged the church deposit refund for a weekend at a place in a disto island where nobody knew our names, and the biggest agenda item was figuring out if dolphins showed up more at morning or dusk. On the first night there, my father called, alone in his truck. He apologized again without theatrics. He told me he was proud I hadn't turned the aisle into a battleground. He said he was tired of being a prop. I asked him to come over the next Sunday and help me build a storage rack in the garage for the gear I keep promising Kate I'll organize. He did. We didn't say the words Beth or Caleb once. We built the rack right, and then we loaded it like men who, like when things stay where they're put. Caleb texted me 2 weeks after the beach. It started with, "Bro," and ended with, "We cool?" I stared at it long enough to watch the dots that meant he was typing a follow-up, and then not typing, and then typing again. I wrote back, "I love you because you're my brother. I don't trust you near my wife. Both things can be true. When you can accept that, we can talk." He sent a thumbs up and then a long block of nothing. It felt like the first quiet he'd given me since he started being my mother's favorite project. We went back to Station 11 life shifts and calls and a steady drip of normal. Kate taught kids how to play in time and how to breathe through nerves. I learned to love the sound of nothing after the tone drops, the way a room holds that pause where you get to choose. On Sundays, we sometimes stop by Folly and stand where we said the right words. The sand never remembers. That's fine. We do. I won't pretend there aren't nights where a smell magnolia and insistence will yank me back to the aisle with a runner curling at my feet. But I learned something in that church that I couldn't have learned anywhere else. People will beg you to make your life smaller so they don't have to change the shape of theirs. They will call your boundary a betrayal and your no an act of war. The most radical thing you can do is say, even here, in the place where everyone thinks the polite thing is to endure, I won't let you turn my life into your show. It felt right to practice that in a sanctuary. It feels necessary to keep doing it in every room after. What would you have done in our place? Cancel the church entirely, or try to push through? And would you have changed the guest list, or given everyone a second chance? Drop your take in the comments, and if this story kept you listening, hit like and subscribe. Next up, I'll tell you how we chose our witnesses without playing family politics.